I'm Paul.
I'm Devin.
Together, we're Dads and Dice, two new dads who like to play some games in our free time.
That's right, and today we are excited to be reviewing Wayfarers of the South Tigris. This is Garfield's newest pseudo dice placement game, starting off his new series of the South Tigris, and we have really been enjoying it.
Yeah, in Wayfarers of the South Tigris, we're going to be explorers, cartographers, and astronomers. We're going to be trying to map out and find the circumference of the Earth. We're going to be exploring the lands, the seas, and even looking up towards the heavens to journal all of our experiences.
Okay, so I am going to try and do a quick, brief rundown of what Wayfarers is and what it's all about. So, as I mentioned, it is a sort of dice worker placement where you're going to be rolling your dice, and the numbers you roll correlate to a value in your mapping little chart area, and that dictates the actions that you can do. So, you'll be using your dice to do actions, and those actions will be gaining more cards to build out your tableau, to then do more actions, gaining resources, gaining other things all along the way. So you have on the left side of your board, like you're leaving Baghdad by land, you have the various land cards, and they're all the yellow cards that you'll keep building along the way there. Mostly be cities, vistas, they can have observatory towers, and libraries. And then if you go through to the right side of your board, it's leaving Baghdad by sea, and you'll be getting either open ocean cards or harbor cards, and it'll be building out your tableau that way. So those will keep adding to different ways to do actions, to use your dice and whatnot. And then eventually you will start to get space cards, and you place those above either city or sea cards, and that is victory point conditions. So it'll be some sort of way of having the most or each of your cities being worth a victory point, or however many vistas you have, or sets of cards, or amount of townsfolk, all kinds of different things. And you can use inspiration cards to possibly boost them for even bigger effects and get double the amount of points from them. And then when it comes to your basic tableau, you can actually recruit townsfolk that tuck underneath the cards, and so there'll be ones it'll be specific for a city or specific for a vista, or you place those underneath, and they then amplify the effect in some way. So maybe making the effect have a cheaper cost, or could be you get a provision, or just all kinds of various different effects there. And so you'll play out, you start with 3 dice, or you could say workers, and you'll play those out. Or I guess I shouldn't say workers, because there is actually also workers that you can use to go onto cards. And workers are never always yours. It's actually a closed economy system, so there's only a set amount of workers in the game, and you actually place them on cards. And so when you acquire a card with a worker, you get that worker. And so there could be a point in time where I have 5 workers and Paul only has 1 worker. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so as the round goes on, you'll eventually use all your dice, maybe have workers, maybe not have workers, and you then do a rest action. And that is where you get to pick up all your dice, roll them, reset, and you can then use the journal track. And the journal track is actually the timer on the game. So the first to the end of the track triggers the end of the game. Now, they're not necessarily the winner of the game, but that is what triggers the end. So it's every time you're coming to the rest and refreshing your stuff, you journal. And the incentive to journal is there's bigger benefits along that track, so you're kind of hoping to get those. But ultimately there's kind of a whole mishmash of ways to score points. It can be off of your tableau, tile placement. It can be off of your space cards, your inspiration, your reputation. There's all kinds of different victory points, and so it makes for some really interesting strategies going forward.
Yeah, so like Devin said, we just finished this playthrough that you can see in front of us, and we really wanted to kind of get our thoughts out there as quick as we could while it's still fresh on our mind. And one thing that Devin and I have talked about, we've played this game multiple times now, and one thing that we keep on coming back to is how much stuff is in this game, right?
Yeah.
Devin mentioned there's dice, there's set collection with your tableau, there's the journaling, so it's a race factor to whoever gets to the end first triggers the end of the game. There's just all sorts of stuff going on, the closed economy with the meeples. Honestly, kind of intimidating to come into. And when you open up that rule book, it's not necessarily the clearest rule book either. It's going to take you some time to dig in it and really find all the little nuances that's going on in this game. First thing, though, that I want to talk about is the caravan, which is where you actually place your dice. I think this is such an awesome mechanic. I haven't seen it before, where you have all the little upgrade tiles and you place them on there, and then you can either plus or minus your die. You have the assets, the camels, the hawks, the boats, the telescope, and those really dictate, am I going to do a land action, a water action, a space action? Then, of course, you have the spots where it's empty, where you can go to the townsfolk. This section right here, the tableau, really does open up a lot of decision space in the game, and it really does make the game a little bit different whenever you play it.
Yeah, so it's I really enjoy, as you mentioned, the caravan aspect of it, and a lot of times I find myself like I'm going to really make my whatever 2s and 3s really strong, and then maybe completely forsake my 4s or something like that. I find that I end up doing something around like that. So one thing Paul mentioned is there is a lot to this game, and it can be, person like me, I love big, complex games, so I wouldn't say intimidating to me, but it definitely can be intimidating to some. And it's going to be a longer teach because of that, because there's a lot of nuanced mechanics in the whole thing. Now, I super enjoy that kind of stuff, and it really caters to that. I honestly compare this very much to Paladins of the West Kingdom, in that you really have to plan your strategy and how you're going to get victory points and how you're actually going to progress along the journal track from the very beginning. If you just do stuff, you can really be punished. Like you can just be doing actions, collecting money, collecting provisions, buying land cards, buying sea cards, and not actually be doing anything to get victory points. You have to be kind of somewhat deliberate in how you're going to do it. Now, the first few rounds, it is generous in that you're not just going to lose it off the first round because you had a bad turn. You can get some cards and, spend a couple of turns actually forming a strategy, but at some point you need to know, hey, this is sort of my engine, this is what's getting me the victory points.
Yeah, and so like Devin said, really you do have to plan from the get-go, especially with this journaling. One of our first playthroughs, I really got punished because I made it 2/3 of the way through the journal and I hadn't collected any open waters or vistas or something, right? And I was stuck. And I had to all of a sudden change my whole plan and start collecting these other things that I had none of because now I'm stuck in the journal. Now, that's not super detrimental. It's not hindering you from getting points. You're not losing anything from that. But you're not really in control of the game at that point, the game length, right? So then it's really on your opponent, and they can really decide when the game is going to end. Another gameplay, I rushed through the journal, just completely through it, just trying to rush the game. And I didn't score. I scored barely any points because the journal, that's not what the journal's for. So you really do have to make sure that, okay, I need to time this game for the appropriate length, that I'm going to gather enough resources to then be able to do all my actions, to then be able to actually get points, because this game can be very punishing in not allowing you to get points, which is the whole point of it.
Yeah, so actually, I think the journaling mechanic it's so neat and it's so much fun, and there's so much strategy to it. As Paul mentioned, it really does not have many points dictated to it. Yeah, you get some inspiration. Yeah, you get the special purple tiles. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot of points tied to it. And you'll eventually get to those spaces anyway. So rushing it doesn't necessarily get you more points because you are blazing on through it. But it's a neat mechanic, and you can kind of do one of two strategies. You can do like Paul and blaze through the thing, and you're going to play a really short game, but you need to know that you're playing a short game and you're going to be in the 30 to 50 scoring point range. Or you can play a long game, and those first several turns, you're not gaining points, but you're really building out an engine, and you're going to be in the 80 to 100 point range. So it can be very widely different, and it's really neat how that journaling track works as the timer of it, and that you're the one that controls that timer. I also like that you can kind of be the one in the lead, and you're really dictating the pace of the game. You're dictating this is going to be a short game, right? And you control that. Or you can sit back and be reactive to it, right? You don't necessarily have to make it to the end of the track to win this game. We actually had a playthrough where Paul hit the end of the track, and I don't even know that I made the halfway point of the track. I didn't even get my last dice, and I won the game because I played this reactive to the situation. Like, okay, Paul is rushing it, so how am I going to maximize every point I can out of my turns, because I know I've only got a few turns in it. So I think that's really a cool way that it does it with that journaling.
And then going back to that gameplay, I know Devin excels in games that are longer because he can build that engine. He can get it working. So honestly, with that game, I told myself, I'm going to rush it. I'm going to not let him build it. And you could tell there was a couple points that were a little frustrating for him because he wanted to do what he normally does, but he knew if he did that, it wasn't going to work out for him. So there is kind of this push-pull mechanic of who's controlling it and who's going on from there. So I do think that's a really cool mechanic in the game.
So mentioning something Paul just said there, I'm an engine building type of person. That's the type of games I like, right? I like the meatier, heavier games, and this definitely hits all that. The one thing Paul said there was, I had decision points that it's the type of thing I would always do, because I have found in my first several playthroughs of this, it was very easy for me to just sit back and do the same thing that I knew worked. And so I will say, when it comes to the replayability of this game, I think there is a decent amount of replayability, but I think you're going to have to be deliberate in doing something different. Otherwise, we could pick all this game up, put it back on the table, and kind of play the same game. Yeah, the cards slightly change, but for the most part, the land cards are going to do what the land cards are going to do. The water cards are doing what the water cards are going to do. Like, all the cards do just the same thing in a different sort of way. And so you're not going to be having drastically different cards that completely alter your gameplay. There's nothing, rule breaking in it that, like, oh, I got this card that's a big rule breaker that I get to now do something. No, you're still doing the same gameplay and flow structure. For people like Paul and I, we get games to the table once every 3 or 4 months. Like a game like this would come out. This perfectly caters to us, because in 3 or 4 months, we're just going to remember, hey, we really like Wayfarers, let's get it out. I'm not going to remember the exact details of how I played. If you're the type of power gamer that you get a new game in and you're just play, I'm gonna play as much of this game as I can because it's fresh and it's new, I could see it getting on the burnt out side a little bit quick because of that. Not that it's a bad game at all. It's just there's not going to be a ton of different replayability from session to session if they're back to back like that. Ultimately, you're still doing the exact same things.
Yeah, there is a little bit of variable setup in it. The board here, it is double-sided, and it does have different journaling tracks on there. The tokens that go in here are put out there randomly. So there is slight variation, but like Devin said, I'm still going to be going for my space cards, for my land cards. My inspiration, instead of having 4 open waters, it might be 4 cities, right? So not too much variation there. Overall, gameplay length, I think this game that we just finished was around 2 hours. Most other ones about 90 minutes.
Yeah,
so about 90 minutes to 2 hours, which is kind of what you expect from a Garfield game, honestly.
Yeah, they've all hit that 90 minutes to 2 hours point. I think, whatever, 4 or 5 playthroughs in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that said, we have only played at 2 players.
Yes.
I definitely see the playtime going up per player. The box says it's 60 to 90 minutes. That is probably true if you're not playing with, let's just say it's somebody like me, who I really think through my turns. I won't say I'm totally AP prone, but I do like to
maximize your efforts,
my actions, right? And so I could see a 4-player game of this maybe going 3 hours, right? I'm sure at some point we will do it with our wives and know for sure. But, I mean, we would also know it. When we're getting this one out, we're getting a Meteor game out, and it's going to be a 3-hour session.
And, I mean, we've mentioned it before. I'm probably the one that acts the fastest in all of these games. And with just you and I, it's still going longer than what the box says. We know it's for sure going to go longer than that otherwise. Another thing, and it's what makes this game long, is resources are so hard to come by. It is just scarce. It's like you are in Baghdad and you can't find anything. You're seriously going through the desert just trying to find food and money, and man, it is hard to do some actions in this game.
Yeah, so I think it's really, I mentioned the actual workers are a closed economy system. In a 2-player game, there are 6 workers, and that is all there's ever going to be. And, in fact, it actually only starts with 4 workers. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 8 workers. But anyway, it starts with 4 workers. A few more get introduced. But that's it. That's all there's ever going to be. And there were a few times in this playthrough here where Paul was sitting on like 4 workers, right? And I'd have like 1 and then like have to wait for him to do something for me to take that card. And it's just really tight like that. But yes, when it comes to the resources, every one of our playthroughs, you're always resource starved in some way or the other, right? Even in a playthrough where I've had tons of coins, right? I never had enough provisions because I had built this engine of getting coins and being efficient with coins, that provisions was my issue. And I constantly was trying to find ways to get provisions, and I hated when I had to use my basic action to get provisions because I just always, you're always going to be needing something, needing a little bit more.
And then even more, the player interaction, I think, is very high in this game because you have your influence over here, and you can actually influence cards. And there was one playthrough where Devin had, I think, all of his influence out, and it was literally on every land card, every sea card, and I was just refusing to go there because that's going to give Devin those resources that he needs, and I don't want to do that, right? I'm already resource starved. Why am I going to give it to my opponent? So I do think the player interaction in the game is pretty high for what it is. Now, saying that, we have had other playthroughs where we barely influence any cards. So really, I guess it's just kind of dependent on what strategy you're doing, but the interaction can be high in this game.
Yeah, for sure. Theme and component wise, the components are nice. I would say decent cards. It's the same cards that are in any Garfield games that you'll find. If you ever back any of their Kickstarters, or you can buy it aftermarket, you get the metal coins. They're always fun to play with. It's always better than the punch out cardboard ones. They still have punch out cardboard provisions, but again, if you're familiar with any Garfield game, right, it's the coins and the provisions. Like, those two resources are always going to be there.
Yeah, you're going to get quality components of all kinds, right? The workers or the classic workers that you have. You have the different dice, which are pretty solid dice, right? They're the little smaller ones than a normal size one. Probably the same type that you'd have at Circadians. But it's all just nice quality. And like Devin mentioned, the metal coins they're really cool to look at. They're different than the West Kingdom coins and then the North Sea coins. So they've got their own little flair to it, which is a nice thing, a nice little touch that they're adding to this trilogy.
Now, theme-wise, maybe because the trilogy is not complete, but, I thought that you had the North Sea games that I found pretty thematic, right? Mm-hmm. You had shipwrights building ships, you had raiders raiding, and you had explorers exploring after the raids. I thought that was thematic. And then you even had the West Kingdom where you built upon the West Kingdom. I would say that was a step down in theme. At the moment, this might be one more step down in theme. It's Baghdad in,
820 AD.
820 AD. You're leaving Baghdad and seeing these land and sea. And there's just, to me, this could have been kind of any pasted theme on it. Personally, it didn't really grasp me.
I'm kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. Okay. I think the theme in this game is it's very strong. I mean, like we mentioned, we're explorers, so we're heading out to the land, we're building that way, and the way that the cards work is they connect together. So you actually have this kind of landscape portrait at the end, right? And then same thing with the sea on the other side, and then you've got your space cards. I really enjoy a game that at the end you can look down and you see what you've built, and it actually kind of like, whoa, that's cool. Like I just made this whole thing, and the way that the cards work here is they all connect, so it's just one cohesive kind of image, right? I think it's cool that you're journaling, right? As in my head at least, it's whenever you've collected all your land and your sea, you're resting for the night and you're journaling your thoughts, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, I've seen a ton of land or a ton of vistas. Let me get my inspiration for that, right? So, that's kind of how I've thought about it. And I think it does work really well. Like Devin said, it's not out yet, right? So we don't know exactly what the theme is. I think it's a good beginning to it.
Okay. So. Well, overall, you can tell we do really like the game. We're probably going to always like a Garfield game. They just keep hitting for us, or for the most part they do, with a few exceptions here and there. But yeah, definitely recommend it. If you have played something like Paladins of the West Kingdom, this is going to play... it's going to feel like that. It's not going to play like that. It's going to feel like that. It's that exact same kind of weight. It's going to be thinky. If you want to win, you're going to really have to think and strategize that part out. Otherwise, the person at the table that's doing that will definitely win this game. There's not going to be any lucky wins, or you just happen to stumble across it. Which, to me... marks a testament of a great game, right? I think the player that played the best should be the one that wins the game, and isn't the one that drew the lucky card or had the lucky thing happen on their turn and snowballed from there. Yeah, so that was Wayfarers of the South Tigris. We hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, throw a little shout out, throw a little comment below. We really do appreciate that. And if you aren't already, please subscribe, hit that notification bell. All those things really do help our channel, help it grow, and we really do appreciate it. Other than that, that's all I've got. We'll catch you on the next one. Okay, so... Well... I was about to say we just got done playing.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that was Wayfarers of the West. Oh no.